Hello everyone, it's 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐸, and today I'm going to be listening to the 8th album by Opeth, 2005's Ghost Reveries. If you haven't heard of Opeth, they're a progressive metal band from Sweden, or more recently a progressive rock, classic rock revival band, I suppose. Anyway, they started putting out their albums in the early 90s and gained a reputation in the underground for combining acoustic folk beauty and death and black metal with the compositional ambition of prog rock. They made many albums into the 2000s with this approach, at the turn of the century polishing their production and composition styles following collaborations with Steven Wilson. Then into the 2010s they transitioned into their current classic prog rock sound, controversially dropping the death metal vocals from their music entirely. I discovered Opeth as a teenage Porcupine Tree fan, always looking for new, exciting, progressive music. But I was not into extreme metal at all at the time, and found the first album I listened to, Blackwater Park, to be quite a difficult listen the first time around. I definitely enjoyed the folkier side of their early albums though on first listen, and I especially enjoyed Damnation, which was a more subdued album from Opeth at the time. And as the years have gone by, I've actually got into quite a lot of extreme metal, especially black metal. And concurrently, I've become more and more of a fan of Opeth's early stuff as time has gone by. I now especially love Blackwater Park and Still Life, but I at least enjoy all of their albums to some degree, even their more recent albums, which seem to get shunned by quite a lot of Opeth hardcore fans. However, even now, there are still 2 Opeth albums I'm yet to hear, and those are 2009's Watershed and the album we'll be listening to today, 2005's Ghost Reveries. I'm expecting something more akin to the Deliverance and Damnation albums that preceded it, since Opeth had not yet made their controversial transition away from metal at this point. The album cover leads me to expect something wistful, romantic, which is a mood I always love in all Opeth music, yet also something dark, and no doubt the death metal influences found in all of Opeth's work up to this point will play a large role in this album too. I am a little concerned by the more than 60-minute runtime of this album. You know, Deliverance is probably my least favourite Opeth album, despite containing some amazing music. It does seem to drag on a bit at times, so I'm just really hoping that's not the case on this album. Ghost Reveries does seem to be very well regarded, with glowing reviews and a very high rating on RateYourMusic, so I'm going to go in expecting the best. And you know, at this point I have heard so much Opeth music, I would say I've really become a fan. Probably my tastes have changed since I was first listening to Deliverance and even the really early Opeth albums. And now let's get into the album with track 1, Ghost of Perdition. Cool, what a good start. Yeah, so I do remember this song well actually. I remember them playing it live when I saw them back in 2017 on the Sorceress tour, where I got my t-shirt. And yeah, what a great song. The production is amazingly clear and dynamic so far. It sounds so good, I might have expected it was produced by Steven Wilson like their albums prior to this one. But in fact it was produced by the band themselves and 𝐼𝐻𝐬𝐴, who was working with Katatonia at the time. So yeah, it sounds like he's done a great job. And you know, it feels so good to hear the studio version of this song at last, because without even realizing it, I think this was already one of my favorite Opeth songs, despite not even knowing the original version. Just because hearing it live and hearing it on the live album, as I mentioned earlier, I listened to that live at Red Rocks, I think it was, quite a few times. And yeah, I've really come to love this song. But I have to say, I was still blown away by the studio version. It really lives up to it. It seems like a really great version, maybe even the ultimate version of the song. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. The melodies, the clean melodies are gorgeous, like really fucking beautiful. And juxtaposed against the death metal sections, the more intense sections, it's a fantastic combination. Obviously, it's Opeth doing what Opeth does best. And I have to wonder, is this song considered one of their best songs? If you're a hardcore fan of Opeth, do you consider this one of their best songs? because I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, it just seems to have everything that Opeth does best all in one track. It's brilliant. So the rest of the album has a lot to live up to after that. Track 2 is another 10-minute epic, and it's called The Baying of the Hounds. Right, so that was a pretty complex one in terms of the arrangement. A lot of parts put together to make this huge epic song. It'll probably take me a few more listens to really get into all of the parts, but I found something to enjoy in almost all of it. On one hand, this song, at least it started out as heavy as Opeth gets, really. It was a real heavy one. But it also ends up calling forward to the future of the band with the classic Hammond organ sounds and the huge vocal harmonies in the cleaner sections. But the atmosphere of this song was thick. It really beautifully matches the smokiness of the cover art. And I love the medieval vibe at some parts of this as well. Some excellent drumming on this song too. Now on to track 3, Beneath the Mire. Wow, extremely cool atmosphere at the end there. At the start of the song, I felt once again that I could feel them calling towards the direction they would end up going into the 2010s. It's making their transition on Heritage seem much less jarring than I'd previously thought it to be. And I really loved that Mellotron melody at the start. It was really gothic and yet really memorable. Like, it's a catchy tune despite being quite unusual. And I also really appreciated on this song how confident 𝐒𝐿 seems to be getting with his voice on this album. Like, you can tell he just believed in it entirely by this point, and it sounds great. There were also so many little bits of styles from all different places injected into this one song. One point I heard like some Thin Lizzy style dual guitar leads, and they also managed to work in some jazz fusion influences around the middle point in the chords and the guitar solo, which was almost sounding like something Alan Holdsworth would do. So yeah, every song so far has had a really vast diversity in its sounds, styles and genres, even just across single songs. Now on to track 4, it's called Atonement. Alright, so from what I can tell, that last minute of the song was actually like an intro to the next song, Reverie and Harlequin Forest. So just to talk about Atonement, the first 5 minutes, the first thing I thought was, this sounds a bit like Porcupine Tree. I know Steven Wilson and 𝐒𝐿 were pretty influential on each other around this time. Steven Wilson himself even started sounding a bit like Opeth on the last couple Porcupine Tree albums at times. And obviously that back and forth would culminate in their collaboration, Storm Corrosion, which I liked quite a bit. I know not everyone loves that album, but for me it's actually one of the best things I've heard from both of them. I love it. But this song ended up going more into this sort of Indian flavoured jam, which actually made me think of the Beatles more than anything. You know, the kind of Within You, Without You, Tomorrow Never Knows kind of sound with its drone and all these kind of sound effects going on all around it. There was even a bit of backwards guitar, I think, at one point, really sounding like Tomorrow Never Knows. I didn't feel this one had the strongest melody or anything, but a very cool atmosphere. And it worked really well after the first 3 more intense songs. Now, that was a very nice chord sequence we had at the end of Atonement, acting as the intro into Reverie, so I'm very excited to hear where it goes from there. Let's get into it. Track 5, Reverie, Harlequin Forest.
Into the street.
All right. So that was, I think, the longest song on the album so far. Yeah. And I have to say, there were parts, especially towards the beginning of that song, where for the first time I started to feel slightly tired of the sound, despite the fact that the intro was surprisingly groovy, actually. But what really re-engaged me, plugged me back in, was the acoustic parts that came in partway through, with the atmosphere over the top. I just loved the way that the synthesizers sounded against the acoustic guitars. That's a great sound. And then the ending of the song reminded me very much of the ending of Deliverance. This kind of monotone yet complex repeating riff with all the synth and leads over the top. It's a great trick, and it sounds great here as well. Next song is a shorter one. It's track 6 and it's called Hours of Wealth.
And I'm biding my time once I am sure on my...
Okay, so on that one we had even more very upfront mellotron sounds. This time the flute sounds at the start. And then as it moved on into the acoustic guitar section, we had these big swells of strings. Sounds really great, as mellotron usually does. And it had some beautiful chord changes as well in this song that really, hit me. And of course, we had yet more very confident and emotive vocals from 𝐒𝐿. I was somewhat reminded of some of his work on Storm Corrosion, directly in this case. Something like the last track, I think it's 𝐒𝐢𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐿. Yeah, quite, as I said, very emotive. And I actually really like those almost soulful vocals from 𝐒𝐿. He can do it well. Not the most memorable song on first listen. It almost feels like a drawn-out interlude, but I mostly enjoyed it. So on to the last epic of the album. It's track 7, and it's called The Grand Conjuration. All right. So that was definitely the darkest song on the album, I think. That's how it struck me. A really heavy atmosphere, even in the more gentle sections. I think it had some of the most impressive growls I've ever heard from 𝐒𝐿. And I have to say, I was very impressed with a lot of the playing on this song from everyone. Some amazing drumming. Shout out to Martin Lopez. I think this was his last album with the band. And some excellent guitar solos as well. Really spot on performances. But I think the best thing about this song was, once again, the atmosphere, the smoky kind of dark and mysterious atmosphere. I really liked that. I was again reminded of Storm Corrosion in some of the chord choices, how they're played, some of the melodies even, and even the texture of the sounds at times. And it's really cool to hear that some of those aspects of Storm Corrosion that I've loved so much since it came out have their stylistic origins here. It kind of makes me wish I had listened to this album back then, but I'm listening to it now and enjoying it a whole lot. And that just leaves us with the last song, which is just a short one, the shortest on the album, I think. Track 8, and it's called Isolation Years. It's a really beautiful way to go out. The atmosphere of the song reminded me of Face of Melinda, off Opeth's album Still Life. It's probably one of my favorite Opeth songs. So I'm always happy to hear that style, that sound from them. And on this one, I really loved the longing in the vocal performance. Really a kind of desperation in the way he's singing there. I think 𝐒𝐿 does that really well. And we had some really nice clean lead lines throughout as well, with the lonely Swede sound, as Steven Wilson calls it. But yeah, not a bad way to end the album, not at all. So what do I think of Ghost Reveries after my first listen? I thought it's really interesting to hear the missing link between the two eras of Opeth that I already know and love very well. But I think the key thing about this album is its really strong atmosphere. It really tied the album together well. And when I look back on this first listen, that's what I'm going to remember the most, the smoky, dark atmosphere. But I also get the feeling that Opeth were really trying to make like their ultimate album with this one. The way it balances all their strengths, The way all the songs seem to have everything they've ever done all mixed together into these songs. And I did appreciate it for that. And I look forward to hearing it again to dig into those songs again. On first listen to the album, I have to say I did feel it felt slightly drawn out, you know, as I kind of expected with such a long runtime. Especially though in this case, I think it was largely caused by some of the interlude tracks being drawn out to the length of a full song. I'm not sure that was a good idea. I mean, again, it might be something that grows on me with more listens, but that was my feeling on this first listen. But generally speaking, the atmosphere was so good. There were a lot of memorable lines throughout, and I really enjoyed it. Like I said earlier, I'm really excited by the fact that stuff I heard later from 𝐒𝐢𝐬𝐜, the later Opeth stuff, and Storm Corrosion, you can hear the origins of those sounds in this album, and I did really appreciate that. These might even be the best cases of those sounds. So I have a feeling this is going to end up being a favorite of mine. It's definitely left a good impression on me after this first listen. A damn good Opeth album. I enjoyed it a lot. So in a moment, we're going to take a look at the ratings and some comments over on RateYourMusic to see what people are saying about the album. If you enjoyed my reaction and my thoughts on the album, please like the video, leave me a comment to let me know what you thought. And if you'd like to support me to be able to continue making these videos, keep the channel going, you can use the link in the description to buy me a coffee. I really appreciate it. So here we are on the RateYourMusic page for Ghost Reveries. And as you can see, it's extremely high rated, 3.90 with 9,500 ratings. That actually puts it at 553 of all time, fourth best album of 2005. And if we scroll down here to the track list, the highest rated track is Ghost of Perdition, and that does not surprise me at all. What an amazing track. And I was thrilled to hear the studio version of it. And in second place, we can see The Baying of the Hounds and Reverie Harlequin Forest. I have to say, Harlequin Forest was not my favorite. It might need to grow on me a bit, but that was actually the only point in the album where I was a little tired of the sound, as I said at the time. Baying of the Hounds I loved. Now let's go and take a look at the comments, see what people are saying. So Winter's Gaze said, got really fucking into it when the Grand Conjuration came on, and I hurt my neck and was grinning really fucking hard the whole time. Yeah, I mean, the Grand Conjuration was definitely the most intense song on the album. Really dark and heavy. Loved it for that. Poor Steel Storm said, oh, the title The Baying of the Hounds is taken from 𝐶𝐢𝐬𝐜 lyrics? Oh, well, if that's the case, that's really cool. Yeah, I remember hearing that 𝐒𝐢𝐬𝐜 is a big fan of 𝐶𝐢𝐬𝐜, which does make sense. You can hear the influence of their dark, folky prog sound in Opeth. And if you haven't heard First Utterance by 𝐶𝐢𝐬𝐜, you must check it out. It's really an incredible album. This guy 𝐿𝐴𝐻𝐿 said, I'm listening to this only for the album cover, and am I going to get disappointed? And then he replied, well, a little bit. Sounds nothing like the cover. Not a bad album, though. I don't agree with that. I think it sounds just like the cover. You know, the cover's really dark. It's a really dark album. But more than that, it's the smoky atmosphere. As I said in my reaction, the atmosphere is so thick in this album, and I feel like the album cover really depicts that. And this guy, The Tragic Prince, replied, this sounds exactly like the cover. Yeah, exactly. 𝐿𝐴𝐻𝐿 said, the bloated and overlong performances bring down an otherwise compelling record. And yeah, I have to say, I do agree with this. I think that if the arrangement of these songs and the album as a whole was a bit more concise, it would be a really incredible album. I mean, I think it was a great album, but yeah, it was kind of let down by this bloat. 3on3 said the psychedelic Opeth album, and that's an interesting take. And yeah, obviously there was the, I don't remember what the song was called, the more Indian sounding one, I think it was Atonement. It obviously really had that kind of classic psychedelic kind of sound. And even in some of the bigger songs, in like the synthesizer sounds on top of the guitars, it gave it this really psychedelic mood a lot of the time, which I thought was really cool. 𝐿𝐴𝐻𝐿 said, when they bring that acoustic section back at the end of Ghost of Perdition, but build on it, goosebumps every damn time. Yeah, I know just what you mean. It's one of the things that makes that song possibly the best Opeth song I've heard. One of the best, anyway. Incredible. And in fact, Moon Halo said, if you think Ghost of Perdition isn't the greatest song ever written, I have some bad news for you folks. Okay, I'm glad to see that other Opeth fans do have this opinion. What a great song it is. And just to reinforce that again, user Unarum said Ghost of Perdition is easily one of their best, and that really says a lot. The song is an absolute masterpiece of songwriting. Unbelievable. Yeah. Perfectly put. Now, this guy, Passionatal Introvert, said, I've never understood the hate for the Grand Conjuration. It's a highlight on an album of nothing but highlights. Yeah, that's funny to hear. So the Grand Conjuration is not universally liked by fans? That's weird to me. I mean, it's such a huge song, and probably it's the one on the album that's more like their older stuff. I mean, maybe that's just on my first listen because I thought it was the more metal-influenced song. But like I also said, it does have that atmosphere leading towards what he would do next, especially on Storm Corrosion. So maybe that explains why Opeth fans don't love that song so much always. But you know, just a few comments later, Arhan95 said, couldn't agree more. So quite a divisive one, it seems. And this guy, Ol the First, said, so prog fans are generally unhappy that Opeth don't do the Flower Kings of sort of shit. And the other ones can't digest anything more complex than Napalm Death, so hence the shit show. Well, I'm sure that's quite reductive, but maybe it is kind of summing up how a lot of people feel about Opeth, that they're not giving you one thing with strength. And like I said, this particular album really felt like almost like the perfect middle point of everything they do. And I don't know, for me, that made it feel like, in some ways, an ultimate Opeth album on first listen. But maybe that's not something that works for everybody. Anyway, I think that'll do for now. If you've enjoyed the video, please do click the like button. As I said, if you want to support the channel, you can use the link in the description to buy me a coffee. And thank you very much for watching. Until next time, take it easy.